Sandra, you alluded to it, but the NWSL had its first ever media day this past week where they brought players and teams and media all available in one location ahead of the season. But to do what? Set the scene for us. What was it like at this NWSL Media Day, Sandra?
Pretty massive. The league went ahead and with their plans and they had it out in LA in the Beverly Hills area. And I think that was probably the biggest thing for a lot of folks. There was so many moving parts, a lot of questions with, surrounding the wildfires that had taken place ahead of time. And, a lot of folks, rightfully and correctly concerned with that. But it was really interesting getting to talk about it a little bit with players and their feelings on it as well. Just sort of having, again, I think I mentioned this as a tangible thing to point out and look at and say, here's a thing that that's helping us sort of move forward and look, kind of move on. And it's important to have things to hang on to and give you hope. And I think this was a little bit of that maybe for some players. It was a thing in which they can kind of congregate together and talk about a thing that they enjoy doing, which is their job as professional soccer players. So there was a lot of cool, interesting things, a lot of folks out there to go and content grab, ourselves included, Nike as well. Got a little bit of a sneak peek of some of the kits that are gonna drop.
Nice.
Yeah, so there's gonna be some
Ooh,
cool
are
kind
there,
of.
without giving any details, Sandra, is there anybody already that you're like, "Oh, that's absolute fire"?
I'm not gonna lie. I really like what Houston's got going on. They're cooking. They are cooking in multiple ways this off season,
Okay.
and one of the
Ooh.
kits as well. So I
Houston
know
has
folks.
always had pretty good kits though. Like I
They
liked theirs
they
last year.
have, and there's like a little bit of like a refresher, I think, for people. There's some content out that are already on social channels, but a lot of it, folks are like, oh, like those just look like the same old jerseys. But I think folks are forgetting about the possibility of secondary jerseys, and that's kind of what we
Yeah.
got a glimpse at. So folks will get official glimpses of some of these kits closer to March, closer to when the season is going to kick off. So stay tuned for that. There's going to be a lot of great photography around and the rollouts of that as well. So I know folks are always excited about that. But yeah, Houston definitely caught my eye for sure as far as the secondary kit. And it was great to chat with all sorts of players. There were a ton of Houston players in attendance. Congrats to them. I think they led the way with most players available. But a lot of other players who joined this media day just off of national team January camps as well. And that includes players who were part of that senior camp and that futures camp as well.
Interesting that Houston was such a big presence there. I think that says a lot about the direction that the club is wanting to go and steps in the right direction on all sides of things for Houston to be there. But for the league to have this media day in the offseason, it's first ever time to do it. Frankly, it's a great opportunity to drum up some media attention around the league in what is otherwise essentially a dead zone between the championship and the start of the season, or like when teams meet for preseason. And in years previously, they've had the draft, which is arguably the second biggest event that the league holds behind the championship. So they needed something to fill that hole a little bit. They got this media day. There's a lot of players there, as Sandra mentioned and talked about. But Sandra, you also got to see some players rocking new kits because there have been trades and transfers and signings, and a lot has changed. One of those including the young U.S. Women's National Team superstar forward Jaedyn Shaw, who went from San Diego to North Carolina Courage. She was rocking a blue kit. She was in her Courage gear at NWSL Media Day. You got to talk to her? Is that right? What did you talk about? What can we hear?
Yeah, she's going to chat a little bit about her arrival to North Carolina because, of course, people were very, very interested in that as a trade that just happened not too long ago. But she also talked a little bit about establishing connections alongside teammates during the January camps and kind of putting a little bit of a bookend on that and kind of what she's taking out of what was essentially more like a reset kind of camp and then going into this preseason with North Carolina. So it was definitely a scrum setting. So apologies for maybe any walking around or outside noise that you might hear, but that's part of what media days are. People are familiar with media days. They're usually kind of a whirlwind, and it's usually lots of people huddling
Sandra
around
does it
players. So
all. Camera
had to get a little bit.
Audio tech, reporter, journalist. Take a listen. Why Jaedyn Shaw chose North Carolina Courage?
What motivated you looking to make a move?
I think there was a lot of different things, but I think ultimately for me, I wanted to take my game to the next level. wanted to change, a new change of scenery, new eyes on me. So.
What about North Carolina? That feels like the right fit.
I was actually committed to UNC for 4 years before I went pro, so I already had a connection with Sean and just like the area, and yeah, I was just like really wanting to like play on their team.
Interesting to hear Shaw talk about how she was committed to UNC. Remember, she was one of the first players a part of the U18 mechanism where she was training with Washington Spirit. Ultimately, San Diego snagged her away from the Spirit, but she's back on the East Coast. And it kind of sounds like she had an understanding of what she wanted or rather what she was going to get with North Carolina. The Courage with Sean Nahas because of the relationship made at UNC when she was committed there. And it sounds like it was her decision, Sandra, which is a big question mark. Christine, you're nodding. You agree with that one?
Yeah, I think it was her decision, but I think it was in the wake of just a very lackluster season, a lot of disruption. I feel like maybe she also knew that she wasn't going to thrive staying on the West Coast. I think that North Carolina is a really established team program. They have a vision, they have a system that really works. Nahas is a great coach. I feel like there's more ticks in that positive column for that shift over than, staying in California. I think that she's made the right decision. I think that I'm excited to see how she fits into this system, just some of that link up. I think, especially knowing like Ashley Sanchez is there, we're in for some fireworks, I think.
Yes, for sure. Speaking of Ashley Sanchez, both Shaw and Sanchez were with Emma Hayes and the U.S. women's national team in the January camp. And she talked a little bit about some of the partnerships that she saw. Take a listen.
Were there any types of connections that sort of just like re-sparked once again, like once you got together, which teammates were they with?
I'd say like me and Sanj playing together was fun, especially now that we're on the same team and we can bring that into every day. I think getting to play with Ella Stevens, back playing with Hatchie, it was like cool just like playing alongside different players and kind of like being able to like use their strengths instead of just like having to play against them all the time and like having to do all that. So yeah, I mean those couple of players, I think it was cool.
I was funny you mentioned Sanchez because spoke to her for a second and I asked about like if you guys got together and you're already kind of like plotting and planning for 2025 and she said conversations were had and she just like left it like that.
They were had for sure.
I love it when players are like, yeah, I'm excited to play with this person and not against them. It feels like that was essentially the takeaway from Jaedyn Shaw. I mean, to have a connection at the club level between Shaw and Ashley Sanchez that can translate a little bit to international game and to the play on the bigger stage of things, it seems very promising for both sides, club, country, Sanchez, and Shaw, to be honest.
For sure. It was, this clip didn't make it here, but folks are going to be able to listen to the full stuff on the podcast version. But it was interesting to sort of hear her say that because one of the answers that she also gave in this scrum was talking about her roles on the pitch. And she alluded to the fact that she has to be that kind of utility player, a bit versatile in ways just because of the different sort of other players that are on the team as well when it comes to North Carolina. So she's ready to show those connections off with Sanchez, but I think they're both equally ready to kind of make sure that they are both kind of covering for each other and playing with each other as well.
There's a lot of growth that can happen at North Carolina, especially with now the absence of Caroline, who is no longer there. There's a lot of space for Sanchez, for Shaw to continue to develop themselves. But goals for players like these, yes, at the club level, they want to succeed. They want to fit in well at their club. They want playing time. But there's a bigger aspect of it too on the international level and getting back into consistent swing of things under Emma Hayes with the U.S. women's senior national team. And there were some other takeaways for Jaedyn Shaw at Media Day.
What were maybe some of the things that did resonate with you that you do want to carry in through the 2025 season?
I mean, I think like I got to train a lot of things and ask a lot more questions, go over film and kind of like clean up the little details that I wasn't able to in the last couple camps. I mean, I think I've gotten closer with a lot of people here, so I was able to spend some time with some of my new teammates and kind of dive into that a little bit.
Christine, what do you think?
I mean, I have, and maybe it's just me, but I have this overwhelmingly positive outlook for Jaedyn Shaw to North Carolina. I think that she has the right attitude. She's very positive. She's extremely talented. I think, I don't know, this was probably one of the best moves North Carolina have made. And I think it's the best for her too. I
Mm.
think that we're going to see her just exponentially grow. We know she hasn't reached her ceiling yet. So I'm super excited for
Mhm.
Jaedyn Shaw.
Cool for her to get time in this January camp where there were no friendlies. So it was very self-reflective, it sounds like, from the US women's national team and US soccer. Even Shaw saying that she's had time to watch film, look back at things, and talk about how it has already gone with her at the international level, and maybe get some one-on-one communication with the coaching staff and technical staff to just kind of take a breath. It's so high stress in those national team camps, but when there's no friendlies, you have to imagine it's a little bit more of like, okay, like I'm here. Like, yes, I have to prove myself in training, but like there's no outside speculation that's coming in from media or anything like that. Us talking about their performance in the game and this and that. But on Attacking Third, we always say things, and then as soon as the show is done, things change a lot. Last Thursday, we talked about Bay FC, what they needed to do in 2025 to be better, and we talked a little bit about Venezuelan international Deyna Castellanos, her role with Bay FC. And of course, we stop recording and news drops out of Sandra. It was a Sandra bomb. What happened, Sandra? Fill us in.
You know what? I think that's what's most curious about this entire thing is that the timing of everything. Bay FC announces that there's a mutual agreement for the contract to kind of take care of itself. I believe Bay FC had to buy out some of that contract, and Deyna Castellanos is going to be a free agent essentially, and she's able to kind of navigate where she wants to go next. So it was all very much in quick succession. So you see something like this drop being made official by Bay FC. We're literally at a media day where Deyna Castellanos is. She was at media day ready to talk about the upcoming NWSL season. And at this point, in this moment, when that drops, ahead of players coming into a press junket, you have a player that's technically unaffiliated with the team that you thought you were going to speak to her about. So naturally, in that setting, you do your job as a reporter. And Deyna Castellanos to Portland Thorns FC for 2025 and beyond.
Oof. How funny though to be a player and like, or even media at that sense, and you think you're gonna go sit down in front of or get her in a Bay FC capacity, and it's like, switch
Yeah.
Portland Thorns. So Deyna Castellanos to Portland Thorns for 2025. Take a listen to this clip.
Hi, Dana. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Signing Portland. Talk to me a little bit about this process. You getting to NWSL, and now you were with Bay, but now you're going to play with Portland. How does it feel to go from an expansion club, kind of different experience, to a club that's been in the league since its beginning?
Yeah, like exactly. Like it's a completely different experience. Like going and now playing for Portland, which is a club that has so much history, has so much success, and is something that is for me is very exciting because that's something that I'm more used to. They coming from Europe, but the experience at Bay was unbelievable, and obviously like now coming here like is even more exciting, and I can't wait to start.
I feel like we kind of, not that we have like a crystal ball, but every time we talk about a player, like immediately something happens. It happened with the Washington Spirit too, with them getting that international spot, and then right away, goalkeeper. Like we finished taping and then something happened. So I don't know who we're gonna pick out today, but um I guarantee we'll end up finishing today's show and then boom, there'll be more news about somebody we talked about. But I digress. Deyna Castellanos, um, great get. I feel like Rob Gale has now the time under his belt and the direction to sort of put pieces that the Thorns have needed into place. And I think that Deyna will be absolutely great for them. They lost some players, they had some retirements. Um, I think that toward the latter part of the season, we really saw the Thorns kind of start to correct and have an identity again. And so I think that she'll be a massive, massive add to their attack.
I'm not so convinced how much we're going to see of Deyna Castellanos initially at Portland. It has
Ooh.
been a tough transition for her to come into the NWSL, and she struggled with playing time. She struggled with a lot of consistency. I do believe that going to a quote more established club, just purely based on tenure in the league, there is elements there that will definitely help her, because it's almost like we have a system and you just kind of fit into the mix and into the shuffle, and you have to kind of go along the conveyor belt, not in a negative way, honestly, in a good way. There's a lot of things already set in stone. Whereas at Bay FC, it was like so much pomp and circumstance around every little thing because it was an expansion team, which is well deserved. But as a player that is adjusting to a lot of different things, that can be overwhelming. I jury is still out for me on Deyna Castellanos and what happens.
I don't know. I feel like the 2.0, her knowing what she's getting into better at this point because she's got a feel from the inside, is going to be favorable for her. But I also think that like Rob has done a good job of being like, here's where I need you to step up for players and getting
Mhm.
them to kind of
Yeah,
start to
I
climb
I'm
agree.
that
also
mountain.
curious as to where he's gonna play her
With her.
ultimately. I think that's
Yeah.
part of it as well. I mean, this is a player that has typically played attacking midfielder. She got listed and signed to Portland as a forward specifically. I think that's already kind of maybe signaling some things. And I think it's also interesting to note that some of the adjustments that Bay FC tried to make, there was maybe moments where they asked her to play lower. Was that something that worked out for either the coaching staff or the player? I think you could take a look at maybe some of the stat lines and just be motivated by those numbers and say, no, it didn't work out.
Exactly.
Um,
But
I
how
think
well
we'll
do you
see.
think she's going to translate from attacking midfielder to forward? I think there's also going to be a jump.
There's going to be a jump. I think it's going to take some. It's going to take something, and that's on the coaching staff
Exactly.
to unlock that and figure that out, because we saw how frustrated Sophia Smith was last year, and we saw
Oh
how
yeah,
much of
super isolated. I
success
just think,
relied on her. And so, how's Morgan Weaver going to look coming back from an injury, this year? How is that all going to flesh out? So, are those players, those younger players that they got last year, going to take that next step in their sophomore year, whether it's, Linehan or Turner, how are they going to look in year 2 of their professional career? So I would argue, with the exception of Sophia Smith, who's now Sophia Wilson, sorry, we're going to all have to get used to that maybe there's some open looks there in the attack for Portland.
We'll
I
see.
think that if
All eyes
anything
on
though,
March 15th.
yeah, she'll add though, Dana will add to another player who's really good on the dribble, and they definitely need that. So fingers crossed. I'm optimistic.
We'll see. Countdown is on to March 14th, opening weekend for Portland Thorns, Deyna Castellanos, all to come this season.